In the last several lessons, you've heard me continue to repeat the word rate anytime we talk about ratios and fractions and things like that. And today's lesson is focused directly on rate. The biggest thing that we have to remember when we're talking about rate is, we start out with, this compared to that, but when I get to a unit rate, then I'm going to be comparing this to that, but I have to have a denominator of 1. So we could have rates such as 60 miles for 3 hours, but when I reduce that down to a denominator of 1, the 20 miles per hour is my unit rate. Or I could have 40 words per minute that I type, or per 2 minutes, but when I reduce it down to 1 minute, then I'd have 20 words per minute, and that would be my unit rate. So I have to remember when I get into unit rates that I'm talking about out of 1. We could talk about going to the grocery store and buying hamburger, and we can have rates of price per weight. Or we talk about gasoline at the gas station, we know it's a certain price per gallon. So that rate is comparing two different things that are not measured in the same way, and it's usually that word per the other one when we calculate rate. So let's get started in our book. Remember to write down the notes that we take and keep up. Pause if you need to and rewind if you need to, if you get distracted. But truly focus on what we're doing. Listen to what I say. Write down what I write down. So we're talking about some kind of crazy, weird fruit. Well, it says the star fruit, or the carambola, is the fruit of a tree that is native to Indonesia, India, and Sri Lanka. Slices of the fruit are in the shape of a 5-pointed star. So this is the shape of the fruit without being cut. And then when you cut it, you do indeed get a star out of the slice. Laura paid $9.60 for 16 ounces of star fruit. Find the price of 1 ounce of star fruit. So we have to figure out what it is that we're calculating for and fill in the information that is being asked. It says, recall, the unit rate makes a comparison to 1 unit. So we find a rate, and then we're going to find a unit rate. So we're going to have 2 answers for each of these problems. So on this one, it talks about how we have to write originally the ratio or the original rate that we're talking about. Because we're going to put a price over the weight, or the price to the weight, or the price per weight. So when we go back to our information, we're talking about price to weight, then we're talking about what? Well, we're talking about $9.60 to 16 ounces of the star fruit that we bought. Then I have to figure out that when I do my unit rate, I have to divide. What am I going to divide by? Well, I'm going to divide the numerator and the denominator. But why? Why do I need to do that? What is it that I'm looking for? What is it that I need? Well, I have to remember when it comes down to unit rate that I have to have a 1 as my denominator. So I know that when I do my division here, it's whatever my denominator is so that I can get a 1. This is 16 ounces, so I'm going to divide each of those by 16. So when I do the math and I set it up, I put my top number, once again, inside my division box. Then I'm going to divide by my bottom number, or my denominator. Top one always goes inside the box. That set me up with a division of decimals. And you should ask yourself a question, well, can I divide a decimal by a whole number? I can, but I have to do something first. And that's what that green arrow is. It reminds me that I have to bring my arrow up first. Once I do, the 16 times 6 does indeed give me 96, but it's a money problem, so I know I have to have 2 decimal spaces. So I bring down that 0 and raise it up, so I can see that it's going to be 66. So what we're saying is that my unit rate is 60 cents per ounce. So we could say, well, then a star fruit is 60 cents per ounce, or we could write it as 66 per ounce on the next lines. So we're talking about every $60, or 60 cents, excuse me, I would get 1 ounce of star fruit. So when I'm buying 16 ounces, I know I'm going to be spending my original $9.60 that I started with. So it's taking the information that I'm given in the story problem, setting it up as a rate, something over something else, and then I'm going to reduce to where my denominator is 1. So remember, the key to doing a unit rate is making sure that I have a 1 as my denominator. Last year when we started doing these books, I had a lot of students that messed it up because they would only give me a rate, and they wouldn't then turn around and find a unit rate as well. And if it asks for both, I have to have both as my answer. So let's look at the hummingbirds and the geese. It says during migration, a hummingbird can fly 210 miles in 7 hours, and a goose can fly 165 miles in 3 hours. Which bird flies at a faster rate? So first thing I have to do is write the rate for each of the birds. And I'm talking about my hummingbird, so I'm talking about 210 miles in 7 hours. So I would write my 210 in my top number. And then when I'm talking about the goose, then it says the goose can fly 165 miles in 3 hours. So my bottom number here has to be 3. So my basic rates are 210 miles per 7 hours for a hummingbird. And my basic rate for goose is 165 miles per 3 hours. But then if I'm going to compare them, if I want to see which one flies fastest, that's why I have to have a unit rate. Because the unit rate will always give me a denominator of 1. And if I have the same denominators, then I know I can compare numerators. So in order to solve this problem, I do have to then use my unit rate. So when I know what I'm looking for, and I solve for them, then I'm going to do my division. So my denominator is a 7. I have to divide numerator and denominator by 7. Over here, my denominator is 3. So I have to divide numerator and denominator each by 3. By dividing by the denominator once again, it gives me that required 1 as my unit in my denominator. So when I do my division then, 7 does go into 210 30 times, and 3 goes into 165 55 times. Is that my answer? No, because it says to compare the unit rates. I have 30 miles per hour, and that is faster than my 55 miles per hour. So when I fill it in, I know that it's going to be faster, so I have to list it first. It's faster than my 30, so my answer is that the goose flies at a faster rate. So a lot of information here. It's very simple math. It's very basic math, taking our ratios that we've been working on before, but we're comparing unlike terms, so now we have labels involved. And then when I know that my labels are stacked correctly, then I'm going to reduce to where my denominator is a 1 so I can get my unit rate. By finding all that information, then I go back and answer the original question that was being asked. Which one flies at a faster rate? Looking at B then, we're going to compare apple juice and apple juice. Well, they're the same thing. Okay, but one apple juice is 64-ounce bottle, and another apple juice is, well, a 15-ounce bottle. So they're not exactly the same. So what we're actually comparing is the size of bottles and then the cost. So it says to write the rate for each bottle. So once again is the original numbers. So I'm going to take my 64 ounces, and it is at $5.76. $5.76 for what? My 64 ounces. And then my second apple juice is 15 ounces, so it's going to be at $1.80 for what? For 15 ounces. Those are my original rates given to me in my math problem. $5.76 per 64 ounces and $1.80 per 15 ounces. So then it says to find the unit rates so I can see which is the better buy. So once I have that information written down, then I'm going to have to divide. What do I divide by? I divide by my denominator, because I have to reduce it to where it's going to give me a 1 as my denominator. This needs to be a 1, so I'm going to divide by 64. And if I divide my denominator by 64, I have to divide my numerator by 64. And over here, to get a 1 as my denominator, I have to divide by 15. Therefore, I have to multiply or divide my numerator. by 15. So once I do that math, and that's where your handy dandy calculator comes into play, you can write down your math and show me your work by then typing it in and getting your answers. So what I see is that in my 64-ounce bottle that I'm spending 9 cents per 1 ounce, and in my 15-ounce bottle I'm spending 12 cents per 1 ounce. So then I look at the questions, compare the rates. Something is less expensive. So the one that's less expensive, I would say my 9 cents per ounce is less expensive than my 12 cents per ounce. And therefore, the final question that's being asked after I show all that work is simply, will the blank ounce bottle cost less per ounce? Which one? We're talking about the 64-ounce bottle is less expensive per ounce than the small bottle. Those type of problems are for each and every one of us to use on a daily basis. You want to know what you're spending to get the best buy. If you can figure out which one is the best buy, then you can buy a larger bottle if you're saving money. But if you only have so much money to spend, then it really doesn't matter what the rate is, because you would spend the amount of money that you have for the smaller bottle. So it's using math on a regular basis in our daily lives and applying it to where we can. So we're going to do the work then in our workbook. Once again, please stay focused with me. Follow along. Fill in your book. Learn what we're doing. Listen to me, and then you'll do just fine. So we have our first one that we have. Sarah drove 72 miles on 4 gallons of gas. So we're going to start by writing our rate. Well, how do I know what I'm being asked overall in these math problems? We look at the directions. It says to write the rate. And if I stop there, I'm going to miss a point, because that's what happened to many of my students last year. They didn't read, it says then find the unit rate. So I have to have 2 math problems in these. So I'm going to start with my original rate, which was 72 miles on 4 gallons. That's my answer to number 1. Then I'm going to solve for my unit rate. Well, if I have my 72 miles for 4 gallons, and I need a unit rate with a denominator of 1, then I'm going to divide by 4. And my numerator is going to be divided by 4. And so when I divide then, what do I get? So once I get it all set up and I work through the math problem, then I can see the 72 miles divided by 4 leaves me with 18 miles per gallon. So I have my rate of 72 miles for 4 gallons, and I have my unit rate of 18 miles per gallon. What about number 2? Number 2 said that Dean paid $27 for 4 movie tickets. So I have to start with my rate, and then I have to solve for my unit rate. So I'm going to have my rate of $27 for 4 movie tickets. Question number 1, answer. Question number 2, I'm still waiting on. So then mathematically what I have to do is divide each of those to get a denominator of 1. And how am I going to get a denominator of 1? Once again, I'm going to divide by 4. So 27 divided by 4, we can add those decimal places back. Can I divide by a decimal, or a decimal by a whole number? Yes. First I have to raise my decimal, and then I divide. 4 goes into 27 how many times? Well, 4 times 7 is 28, and that's not right. So I'm going to have to do 6, and 6 times 4 is 24, which gives me a remainder of 3. And I bring down my 0, and 4 times 7 is 28, with a remainder of 2, and then I bring down my 0, and 4 goes into 25 times. So what we're saying then, once we solve for it, is that we are going to spend what? If I have $27 spent on 4 tickets as my rate, then my unit rate is going to be $6.75 per ticket. Only 1. So now question 3, we have Amy and Maya. They have to read Bud Not Buddy. Great book, isn't it? For a class, Amy reads 20 pages in 2 days. Maya reads 35 pages in 3 days. Who reads at a faster rate? So this is a story problem that doesn't have these directions, but I still have to set it up the same way in order to solve for it. So the first thing I have to do is set up what? I have to set up my original rates. And I know that Amy reads at 20 pages per 2 days, and that Maya reads 35 pages for 3 days. Then I can't compare them. So I have to reduce down, I have to divide by denominators to find my unit rate in order to say who reads more. Because then they'll have a unit rate of 1 in my denominator, and I can compare my numerators. So when I divide those out, I reduce by 2 and 2, I get my 10 pages for 1 day. And when I divide 35 by 3, I end up with a mixed number, don't I? Or a decimal. You could have a decimal with a repeating number. It could be 11.6666 repeating. But if we keep it as a mixed number, then I have 11 and 2/3 pages for 1 day. Is that my answer? No, it's not, because it doesn't answer my question at all. It's the work that leads me to my answer. Because the question is, who reads at a faster rate? And who reads at a faster rate? I put Mel. It should be M-A-I, Maya. But you have to put the person's name on the line. On the last one, it says, an online music store offers 5 downloads for $6.25. Another online music store offers 12 downloads for $17.40. Which store offers the better deal? So as we talk through it, what are we going to have to do? We're going to have to find 2 rates because there are 2 stores. Then I'm going to have to reduce down to my unit rate, so I have 1 as my denominator so I can compare my numerators. Once I know who has the better numerator or the better deal, then I can write down either, there's no store name, is there? So it'd either be the first one or the second one. So my first step is going to be write down my rate. $6.25 per 5 downloads for store number 1. And then I'd have $17.40 per 12 downloads for store number 2. Those are my rates, and which is given to me in my story problem. Then I'm going to have to find my unit rate so I can do an actual comparison. In order to do my unit rates, then I divide by my denominator. So on this one, we're going to divide by 5s, and on this one, we're going to divide by 12s. And when I divide each of those by 5s, then I'm going to find out that I have $1.25 per download. And over here, I'm going to find that dividing by 12s gives me $1.45 per download. Does that answer my question? No, it doesn't. I have to know which store has the best deal. And it's going to be the first store, because its unit rate shows me that I'm spending less per download than the other store. So well, now I'm going to apply it to the other problems then. I'm going to do this first column over here on the left and have you do the ones on the right once I'm finished. A company packed 108 items in 12 boxes. That's information, but what am I supposed to do? Once again, let's go back to the directions. Write the rate and then find the unit rate. 2 answers. So my original rate is 108 items in 12 boxes. So I would have 108 for 12. 108 what? 108 items for 12 boxes. That's going to be my rate. My unit rate then would tell me to get a what? A 1 in my denominator. So I'm going to have to divide by 12. And once I do that, then I'm going to see that I have 108 items for 12 boxes. And then when I divide, I would end up with, there are 9 items per 1 box. Number 6 is one you're going to do here in just a moment. So number 7, Jeff charges $27 for 3 hours of swimming lessons and charges $31 for 4 hours. How much more does Jeff charge per hour than Ann? So this is one of those, if we read it, some of us have already figured out there's an extra step that I'm going to have to do in this math problem. My first step is to find my original rates to compare. My original rates are $27 for 3 hours and $31 for 4 hours. So when I set those up as $27 over 3 and $31 over 4, then that's going to be my original rates. Now to find out the next step, I'm going to have to find my unit rates. So in order to find my unit rates, then I have to have a 1 as my denominator. So over here, I know I'm going to divide by 3's. And over here, I'm going to divide by 4's. How do I know that? Well, I know that because this has to be a 1. And in order to make a 3 a 1, I have to divide by 3. This one has to be a 1. In order to make a 4 a 1, I have to divide by 4. But once I've done that, then I'm going to divide to find my unit rates. And when I divide, I see that Jeff charges $9 per hour and Ann charges $7.75 per 1 hour. Is that my answer? Maybe Ann has the better rate. Well, that's not my question. My question asks, how much more does Jeff charge per hour than Ann? So now I have to take my numerators of my unit rates and subtract them. So when I stack them up, I have my $9 over my $7.75. I know I have to stack them according to decimals, and then I would bring that decimal down. Then I can subtract. Well, I can't take 5 from nothing, and I can't borrow from nothing, so I had to borrow through, which gives me 10 minus 5, which is 5, 9 minus 7, which is 2, and 8 minus 7, which is 1. So my answer is that he charges $1.25 more. On my last two, tell which rate is faster by comparing unit rates. So I have 160 miles per 2 hours, and I have 210 miles per 3 hours. And what am I actually comparing? My unit rates. So I know I'm going to have to reduce both of those down, and I always divide by whatever the denominator is. So on the first one, I'm going to divide by 2's, and on the second one, I'm going to divide by 3's. And when I take 160 and divide it by 2's, and I take my 210 divided by 3's, then I get 80 miles for 1 hour and 70 miles for 1 hour, also said per. So 80 miles per hour, 70 miles per hour. Which rate is faster? The 80 miles per hour. On number 10, then, I have 270 feet for 9 minutes. And then my second one, I have 180 feet for 9 minutes. Now, some of you will see automatically that there's nothing that I have to solve in order to know what the actual answer is for the fastest rate. But it says that I have to do it comparing unit rates. Now, I'm going to tell you that when you take things like the NWEA or ISTEP or these standardized tests, and if it says to show your work, which is what it says by using or comparing my unit rates, you have to show your work. Even though looking at that, some of you already know what the fastest rate is. So let's work through it. I know I'm going to divide each of them by 9 because my denominators are 9. So I'm going to hypothesize now, but this is going to be my fastest rate because as 9's is my denominators, 270 is more than 180. But let's do what it asks. It asks to compare by using my unit rates. In order to have a unit rate, I have a 1 as my denominator, so that's why we're dividing by our 9's. And once I do that, I end up with 30 feet for or per 1 minute, and then I have 20 feet per or for 1 minute, so I do have the correct answer. It is going to be my 30 feet per 1 minute. My 270 feet in 9 minutes is my fastest. So I'd like you to take a moment, and it's your turn to do 6, 8, and 11. Pause the video now, work through the math problems, push play when you're ready for me to solve. Alright, so as we move forward then, we have 3 different ones that we're going to solve. Hopefully you remembered back at the original questions that we had 2 different answers that we had to write. So on number 6, if you only have one answer, you're going to miss 1 point. You have to have both. My first one is my rate. So I know I have 112 students for 14 teachers. So I'd have 112 students per 14 teachers. And then I'm going to reduce. Well, I'm going to reduce by 14 because my unit rate, second part of the question, has to have a 1 as my denominator. So if I divide by 14 and I take my 112 divided by 14, well, how many times does 14 go into 112? Not 10, because that'd be 140. So let's try 7. 7 times 4 is 28. And 7 times 1 is 7 plus 2 is 90. Well, that's not enough, is it? Let's try adding 14 to it. So that'd be my 8th time, right? And that would give me 112. So I know we're talking about 8. So when I find my unit rate then, my 14 divided by 14, that gives me my 1 teacher. And therefore when I divided or reduced by 14, I end up with 8 students. So my answers should be 112 students per 14 teachers. And then my unit rate, my second point to that one, should be 8 students per 1 teacher. On this one, it says one florist made 16 bouquets in 5 hours. A second florist made 40 bouquets in 12 hours. Which florist made bouquets at a faster rate? So when we look at our fastest rate then, we have to start with our original rates in order to find my unit rate to truly be able to compare. So I'd have 16 over 5. I'd have 40 over 12, because we're talking about bouquets per hour and bouquets per hour. And then I have to divide. So I would divide by 5 and divide by 5. And here I would divide by 12 and I would divide by 12. So when I do that, what I'm going to see is I get decimal numbers. Can I have decimal numbers when I'm solving these? Absolutely, because before we saw that we had a mixed number as my numerator. I can have decimal numbers as my numerator as well to compare, because I know that my denominator is going to be 1. So when I see that she makes 3.2 bouquets for 1 hour, and that this one makes 3.33333, it's a repeating number, bouquets per hour, then I know my second one is working faster. Are they working a lot faster? No, they're not working a lot faster, but they are working faster. My final one then, I have 250 meters per 10 seconds and 120 meters per 4 seconds. So I'm going to be reducing by what to do my comparisons. My first one I would reduce by 10s, and this one you should have reduced by 4s. So when you reduce then, you should have gotten my 25 meters per second and 30 meters per second. So hopefully you chose that the second one was your fastest rate. As I said before, this isn't a lot of difficult information. It is really basic math of multiplication and division. But it's remembering that to take my original information to find my original rate or ratio that we're starting with. So a ratio, once again, is numbers. Rates have labels. But then my unit rate is always going to have a denominator of 1. So when I'm comparing things such as miles per gallon, I know how much I'm going to spend. I'm going to spend $3.86 per gallon. How much is the hamburger? It's $2.29 per pound. So I know what my unit rate is. If you have any questions, please come and ask. Go back and watch the video. The biggest key to this is making sure that we answer both parts, and that when it comes to a unit rate, I have a 1 as my denominator. So I have to divide by the denominator both on top and bottom. Come and ask questions if you have any. If not, look at the board for your assignment.